The Madison County Women's Correctional Facility was located on the outskirts of Oakdale, a stark reminder that even in such quiet corners of Iowa, there are places where society prefers not to look. Gray concrete walls topped with barbed wire stood in stark contrast to the endless cornfields that stretched to the horizon. It was a medium security facility, designed to house 200 women serving sentences ranging from 2 to 20 years. Prison warden Rebecca Stone had run the place for 14 years with iron discipline and a pragmatic understanding of human nature. At 45, she was a woman who had seen it all, from escape attempts to homemade weapons, from prison romances to violent showdowns. Her philosophy was simple. As long as the inmates didn't break the basic rules and didn't cause problems for the staff, minor human weaknesses could be ignored. That's why she turned a blind eye to the special relationship between some of the inmates and Dr. Clyde Hartman. The 42-year-old doctor had been working at the colony for 8 years and had established himself as a professional who genuinely cared about the health of his patients. After his divorce 5 years ago, he threw himself into his work, finding not only a calling but also a way to fill the void in his personal life. Hartman was a short man with kind brown eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, graying temples, and a soft voice that calmed even the most aggressive patients. He never raised his voice, always found time to listen to complaints, and never judged anyone for their past mistakes. For women deprived of normal human contact with men, he became a symbol of the care and understanding they so desperately needed. There was no one more influential among the inmates than Brittany Collins. At 29, she was already serving her 4th year of a 6-year sentence for a series of burglaries she had committed while under the influence of drugs. Brittany was a tall, slender woman with a sharp mind and natural charisma that helped her survive the prison hierarchy. She had long brown hair that she braided into a neat plait and piercing green eyes that could both charm and intimidate. During her years in prison, Brittany learned to read people and manipulate situations to her advantage. She never got involved in open conflicts, preferring to act through others or use psychological pressure. The other inmates respected her not out of fear, but out of recognition of her ability to solve problems and protect the weak from real predators. 2 years ago, Brittany got a job as an assistant in the medical unit. Officially, this was thanks to her education. She had been studying to be a nurse before her arrest, but everyone knew that Dr. Hartman had personally interceded on her behalf. Since then, a special relationship had developed between them, balancing on the line between professional and personal. Every morning, Brittany arrived at the medical unit half an hour before the official start of work. She prepared the offices for the day, sorted documents, and made coffee, which Dr. Hartman particularly appreciated. These quiet morning moments became an island of normality for both of them in the harsh prison reality. "How's Mrs. Peterson doing?" the doctor would ask, looking at the day's schedule. "Her blood pressure has stabilized after the change in medication," Brittany replied, handing him a folder with test results. "But Carol Jenkins is complaining of stomach pains again. I think it's psychosomatic. She has a parole hearing coming up soon." Hartman valued her observation skills and intuition. Brittany understood the inmates better than any of the guards and could often predict who was prone to self-harm or escape attempts. He came to rely on her opinion more than a professional should. Over time, their conversations went beyond medical topics. Hartman told her about his weekend plans and complained about feeling lonely after his divorce. Brittany shared memories of her life before prison and her dreams of finishing her education after her release. They never touched each other or flirted openly, but an emotional closeness developed between them that was dangerous for both of them. Other inmates saw this relationship and envied Brittany. Working in the infirmary meant not only privileges, better food, more comfortable conditions, access to medication, but also the opportunity to interact daily with the only man in the colony who treated them like human beings, not numbers in the system. 8 months ago, a new inmate arrived at the colony, Jessica Reynolds. The 24-year-old woman had been sentenced to 3 years for credit card fraud. Unlike most of the inmates, who came from dysfunctional families and criminal backgrounds, Jessica came from a middle-class family. Her father was an accountant, her mother was a school teacher, and she herself had a degree in psychology. Jessica was the complete opposite of Brittany, short, fragile, with short blonde hair and large blue eyes that often filled with tears. She was struggling with being separated from her family and had a hard time adjusting to prison life. She spent the first few months in a state of deep depression, refusing to eat and avoiding communication. Brittany didn't pay much attention to her at first. She had seen many princesses like her, and most of them either broke down completely or quickly learned to play by the prison rules. But Jessica was different. Her vulnerability was real, not feigned, and this did not inspire contempt in those around her, but a desire to protect her. Jessica was sent to the infirmary for the first time a month after her arrival. She had a panic attack right in the dining hall. She couldn't breathe, cried convulsively, and kept saying she wanted to go home. The guards carried her to the infirmary, and Dr. Hartman spent over an hour with her, calming her down and teaching her breathing techniques. Brittany watched the scene with mixed feelings. On the one hand, she understood that the new girl really needed help. On the other hand, the attention the doctor was giving Jessica seemed excessive to her. When he gently tucked a strand of hair that had fallen onto the girl's face, something cold stirred in Brittany's chest. "She's just manipulating him," Brittany said later when they were alone. "I've seen plenty of girls like that. They pretend to be helpless little lambs to get special treatment." Dr. Hartman shook his head. "No, Brittany. Her fear is real. She has classic symptoms of adjustment disorder. She needs support, not suspicion." It was the first time he had disagreed with her assessment of the situation, and it upset Brittany more than she was willing to admit. Over the next few weeks, Jessica became a regular visitor to the infirmary. She had headaches, insomnia, and anxiety attacks. Dr. Hartman always found time for long conversations with her, explaining that what she was going through was normal and that it would get easier with time. Brittany noticed how the doctor changed during these conversations. His voice became even softer, and a special warmth appeared in his eyes. He began to stay in the infirmary longer than usual if he knew Jessica was coming in for an appointment. Sometimes Brittany would catch them talking quietly, which would stop as soon as she entered the office. The turning point came when Jessica received a letter from her mother. It said that her father had been hospitalized with a heart attack. The girl ran to the infirmary in tears, barely able to speak from grief and guilt. Dr. Hartman not only comforted her, but also personally asked the prison warden to allow Jessica to make an extra phone call home. He also asked the nurse to give the girl a mild sedative and allow her to stay in the infirmary until evening. "Family is the most important thing," he told Brittany as he filled out the paperwork. "We have to help her get through this." Brittany nodded, but inside she was reeling. In 4 years, she had never received such sympathy and understanding, not even when she learned of her grandmother's death. At that time, the doctor had offered his condolences and given her a day off, but nothing more. That evening, while cleaning the medical office, Brittany found a note in the trash can written in Dr. Hartman's handwriting. "For Jessica, everything will be okay. K. He had never left her notes like this before. Prison warden. Rebecca Stone watched the situation unfold with growing concern. She was experienced enough to understand where emotional involvement with inmates could lead, especially when feelings and jealousy were involved. One morning, she called Dr. Hartman into her office. "Clyde, I need to talk to you," she said, pointing to a chair across from her desk. "It's about your relationship with inmates Collins and Reynolds." Dr. Hartman raised his eyebrows in surprise. "What exactly is bothering you, Rebecca?" "The fact that you are getting too emotionally involved in their problems. I understand the desire to help, but you have to remember the boundaries. These women are not your patients in a regular hospital. They are inmates, and some of them are very skilled at manipulating people's feelings." Hartman frowned. "Are you saying that I'm incompetent? I think you're human, and that makes you vulnerable, especially after a divorce. Just be careful." After that conversation, Dr. Hartman became more reserved in his interactions with both women, but he couldn't completely change his behavior. Jessica still needed support, and Brittany was his indispensable assistant. Meanwhile, tensions between the two inmates were growing. Brittany began to notice small but painful details. How the doctor smiled at Jessica, how long their conversations lasted, how he called her by her first name more often than other patients. When Jessica asked to be transferred to another cell, citing a conflict with her neighbor, Brittany realized that the girl was trying to get closer to the infirmary. Sure enough, Jessica soon found herself in a cell just a few meters from the medical wing. Coincidence, Brittany told herself, but she believed it less and less. A winter morning in Iowa greeted the colony with thick fog that enveloped the gray walls and turned familiar outlines into ghostly silhouettes. It was especially quiet in the infirmary. Only the old wall clock ticked, and the footsteps of the nurse on duty creaked somewhere in the hallway. Brittany arrived at work earlier than usual. She liked these early morning hours when the medical ward belonged only to her. She could calmly prepare everything for Dr. Hartman's arrival, arrange the documents exactly as he liked, and brew strong coffee in his favorite mug. A gift from his daughter with the inscription, "Best Dad in the World." Over the 2 years she had been working there, a ritual had developed between them. The doctor arrived at 7 o'clock sharp, and Brittany was already waiting for him with a report on the patient's condition and a plan for the day. They discussed medical issues, but gradually the conversation turned to personal matters. Hartman talked about his daughter, a biology student at the state university, and about his weekends spent alone reading medical journals. "You know, Brittany," he said one day, stirring sugar into his coffee, "sometimes I think you understand people better than many certified psychologists." That was 3 months ago, but Brittany remembered every word, every intonation. She treasured those moments of recognition like jewels, replaying them over and over in her mind during endless evenings in prison. For Brittany, Dr. Hartman had become more than just an employer or a doctor. He was her connection to the normal world, a reminder of who she could have been if it weren't for the drugs and despair that had led her to crime. In his presence, she felt smart, needed, almost free. Their relationship deepened imperceptibly. Hartman began to consult her not only on medical issues, but also on personal problems. When his ex-wife demanded an increase in alimony, it was Brittany who listened to his concerns and offered practical advice. To consult a family lawyer. "You understand people so well," he said gratefully. "I have no one else to talk to about this." Brittany knew she was crossing a dangerous line, but she couldn't stop. Every day she found new ways to make herself indispensable. She memorized what he liked for breakfast, studied his schedule and habits, and learned to predict his mood from subtle cues. When the doctor caught a cold in January, Brittany made him herbal tea from medicinal plants grown in the prison garden. She brought extra blankets to his office and discreetly made sure the heating was working better. Hartman was touched by her care. "What would I do without you?" he said when his fever broke. It was a joke, but there was enough sincerity in it to warm Brittany's heart for weeks to come. However, the idyll was increasingly disrupted. Jessica Reynolds continued to visit the infirmary regularly, and each visit was an ordeal for Brittany. The girl had learned to control her panic attacks, but she had new complaints: headaches, insomnia, digestive problems. Brittany suspected that most of these symptoms were fabricated, but Dr. Hartman took every complaint seriously. He ordered tests, prescribed medication, and had long conversations explaining the connection between stress and physical symptoms. "Prison is traumatic for any mentally healthy person," he explained to Brittany, when she suggested that Jessica might be faking, "especially for those who are here for the first time and have no contact with the criminal environment." The turning point came one day in February, when a junior assistant position opened up in the infirmary. Usually, inmates with medical training or experience applied for such jobs, but the competition was fierce. Working in the infirmary offered many privileges and the possibility of early release for good behavior. Brittany expected the doctor to discuss the candidates with her, as he always had. She had already identified several suitable women, experienced, reliable, and unlikely to compete with her for the doctor's attention. But instead, Dr. Hartman told her that morning, "I've decided to hire Jessica Reynolds. She has a degree in psychology, and I think that will help her adjust." Brittany felt the ground slip away from under her feet. She stood with a folder of documents in her hands, trying to keep a neutral expression on her face while everything inside her was falling apart. "Are you sure, doctor?" she asked as calmly as she could. She has no experience in medicine, and she hasn't fully adjusted to prison life yet. Hartman nodded. That's exactly why she needs this job. The opportunity to do something useful will help her regain her self-esteem and find meaning in her current situation. And you'll help her settle in, I know. It wasn't a request, but a statement of fact. The decision had already been made, and Brittany's opinion didn't matter. For the first time in 2 years, she felt like a prisoner, not the doctor's equal partner. The next day, Jessica showed up at the infirmary in a nursing assistant's uniform. She looked excited and grateful, repeating how important it was for her to feel useful again. I was so afraid I'd never be able to work in my field again, she confessed to Dr. Hartman. Thank you for believing in me. Brittany watched the scene, feeling a cold anger rising in her chest. Jessica thanked the doctor so warmly, so sincerely, as if he had saved her life. And maybe he had. Brittany knew that working in the infirmary could really be a lifeline for a girl who was struggling to cope with prison life. The first few days of working together were tense but polite. Brittany showed Jessica how to fill out medical records, where to store medications, and how to use the medical equipment. Jessica was an attentive student. She quickly memorized instructions, asked intelligent questions, and showed a genuine interest in the work. But Brittany noticed something else. Jessica lingered in the doctor's office longer than necessary, found excuses for personal conversations, and was interested in his opinion on non-work-related issues. She brought a book on psychosomatic medicine from the library and asked the doctor to comment on some chapters. "How interesting that you read professional literature," Hartman said, leafing through the book. "Most inmates prefer novels and detective stories." "I miss intellectual activity," Jessica replied. "There are so few opportunities for mental development in prison." Brittany, who was sorting documents in the next office, heard every word. Jessica was saying exactly what Dr. Hartman wanted to hear. She was positioning herself as an intellectual who had accidentally fallen into a criminal environment, someone who didn't belong there. Gradually, the dynamics in the medical unit changed. Previously, only Brittany and the doctor drank their morning coffee together, but now Jessica joined them. Previously, the two discussed their plans for the day, but now there were 3. Jessica shared her observations about the patients and offered psychological explanations for their behavior, and the doctor listened to her with growing interest. "Maria Gonzalez has classic signs of post-traumatic stress," Jessica said one morning. "I think we should try cognitive behavioral therapy, not just medication." Dr. Hartman raised his eyebrows with interest. "Tell me more." Jessica began to explain the theory she had studied at university, giving practical examples and referring to research. Brittany listened and realized that she couldn't compete with professional knowledge. Her intuitive understanding of people suddenly seemed primitive compared to Jessica's scientific approach. The first open conflict occurred a week after they started working together. Brittany was always responsible for distributing medication to patients, but one morning, she discovered that Jessica had already done the task. "I came in early and decided to help," Jessica explained when Brittany asked her about it. "Doctor, Hartman said he was having a busy day, so I thought, next time ask me," Brittany interrupted sharply. "We have a certain order, and it must be followed." Jessica looked at her in surprise. "Of course, I'm sorry, I just wanted to help." But the incident did not go unnoticed. The other inmates working in the infirmary exchanged meaningful glances. Everyone understood that a power struggle was beginning between the doctor's 2 assistants. The next conflict was more serious. An inmate named Susan Wilson complained of severe toothache. According to protocol, such cases required referral to the prison dentist, but the appointment was not until a week later. Brittany suggested giving the woman painkillers and waiting, as was usually done. Jessica expressed a different opinion. "Maybe we should ask them to speed up the appointment. Toothache can be a sign of a serious infection." Dr. Hartman agreed with Jessica and personally called the dentist to arrange an emergency appointment. It turned out that Wilson did indeed have an abscess, which could have led to serious complications. "It's a good thing you insisted on urgent treatment," the doctor told Jessica. "Your psychological experience helps you see connections that aren't always obvious." Brittany felt humiliated. In 2 years on the job, she had never made a serious mistake, but now she looked incompetent compared to the educated newcomer. The situation was made worse by the fact that Dr. Hartman clearly enjoyed intellectual conversations with Jessica. They discussed medical articles, psychological theories, even philosophical questions. Brittany listened to these conversations and realized she couldn't participate. She had no university education. Her knowledge was practical, not theoretical. The worst thing was seeing how the doctor lit up in Jessica's presence. His eyes sparkled when she expressed an interesting thought. He began to linger in the medical office longer than usual, finding excuses to continue their conversations. Sometimes Brittany would find them leaning over a book or document, and something would tighten painfully in her chest. The turning point came when Dr. Hartman asked Jessica to help him with a research project. He was studying the effects of incarceration on women's mental health and needed help analyzing the data. "Your psychology background will be very useful," he explained. "We could work on it in our spare time, after our main duties." Brittany realized that this meant extra hours spent together, even more opportunities for personal conversations, an even deeper connection between them. She felt the world she had carefully built over 2 years crumbling before her eyes. That evening, while cleaning up in the medical office after work, Brittany noticed that Jessica had left her notebook behind. She couldn't resist the temptation to take a peek. Most of the pages were filled with medical records and research notes, but on the last page she found something else. Jessica had been keeping a diary of her impressions of her work in the infirmary. Most of the entries were professional observations, but a few lines made Brittany's heart beat faster. "Dr. H is so different from the others here. He sees me as a person, not just an inmate. Our conversations are the only thing that makes this place bearable. Sometimes it seems like he's as lonely as I am." Brittany reread these lines several times, feeling anger rising inside her. Jessica wasn't just working in the infirmary. She was systematically winning the doctor's attention, exploiting his loneliness and need for intellectual conversation. The next day, the relationship between the two women was completely ruined. When Jessica tried to talk to Brittany about dividing up their duties, she responded coldly and curtly. When Jessica offered to help with the medical charts, Brittany said she could handle it herself. "Is there something going on that I should know about?" Dr. Hartman asked, noticing the tension between his assistants. "Everything's fine," Brittany replied quickly. "We're just getting used to each other." But everything was far from fine. Brittany felt the ground shifting beneath her feet, her special position in the medical unit slipping away. Jessica wasn't just working alongside her, she was gradually taking her place in Dr. Hartman's professional and personal life. Late that night, lying on her narrow prison cot, Brittany thought about what had happened. She had spent 2 years becoming indispensable to Dr. Hartman, and now this girl with a college degree had come along, and in a matter of weeks, gained the same level of trust and attention. March in Iowa brought with it deceptive signs of spring, sunny days followed by unexpected snowfalls, and winds that alternated between warm and freezing. At the Oakdale Women's Colony, the changeable weather mirrored the growing tension in the medical unit. Brittany woke up every morning with a heavy feeling in her chest. The job that had once brought her joy and a sense of importance had become a daily torture. Every day, she watched Jessica grow closer to Dr. Hartman, their professional relationship taking on a personal tone. The research project was the catalyst for this closeness. The doctor and Jessica spent extra hours in the office analyzing data, discussing methodology, and arguing about the psychological aspects of prisoner adaptation. Brittany heard their hushed voices through the thin wall and realized that she was becoming superfluous in the world she had considered her own. "There's an interesting correlation between education level and speed of adaptation," Jessica said, leaning over the tables. "But don't you think socioeconomic status prior to incarceration also plays a role?" Dr. Hartman nodded, making notes. "You're right. We need to factor that in. Your perspective is very valuable to the study." Brittany stood in the doorway, feeling invisible. The doctor used to consult her on all important matters, valuing her practical experience and intuition. Now he sought Jessica's opinion, admired her theoretical knowledge, and spent time with her that used to belong to Brittany. The situation came to a head when Dr. Hartman announced that he planned to present their joint research at a medical conference in Des Moines. Jessica would be listed as a co-author, an unprecedented move for an inmate. This could help you after your release, he explained to Jessica. A scientific publication on your resume will open doors for you to pursue a career in psychology. Brittany watched the scene unfold, feeling something break inside her. In 2 years of impeccable work, no one had ever offered her such prospects. No one had thought about her future after her release. No one had made plans that could change her life. What about Brittany? Jessica asked unexpectedly. She worked hard on organizing the data too. Dr. Hartman coughed awkwardly. Of course, Brittany's contribution is important. We'll be sure to mention her in the acknowledgements. Acknowledgements. Not co-authorship, not recognition, just a polite mention at the end of the article. Brittany felt her cheeks burn with humiliation. She turned and left the office without saying a word. Jessica caught up with her in the hallway. "Brittany, wait!" she called. "I didn't mean to. I think Dr. Hartman isn't being entirely fair. You know this work better than I do." Brittany stopped and slowly turned around. In Jessica's blue eyes, she saw something she took for pity, and that was the last straw. "Don't!" she hissed through clenched teeth. "Don't pretend you didn't want this." "What are you talking about?" "About how you've been flirting with the doctor since day one, using your degree to impress him, doing everything you can to take my place." Jessica took a step back, fear appearing in her eyes. "Brittany, you're wrong. I'm just trying to do my job." "Your job is not to flirt with the doctor and pretend to be some kind of misunderstood intellectual." "I'm not flirting with anyone," Jessica protested. "And if you think education is a tool for flirting, then maybe the problem is with you, not me." It was a low blow, and both women knew it. Jessica immediately tried to apologize, but it was too late. Brittany heard what she suspected. The new girl looked down on her, considered her uneducated and primitive. "All right then," Brittany said quietly. "Let's talk in a language you understand." She turned and walked away, leaving Jessica standing in the hallway with a confused look on her face. From that day on, the war between them was on. Brittany used her knowledge of the prison hierarchy and her influence over other inmates. She started small, spreading rumors that the new girl was planning to get out early by using her connections with the doctor. In prison, such accusations were serious. Inmates were suspicious of anyone who received special privileges from the administration. Jessica began to notice how attitudes toward her had changed. Conversations stopped when she appeared. People accidentally stepped on her feet in the dining hall, and all the shower stalls were taken, leaving her waiting. But Jessica was not as defenseless as she seemed. Her psychological training helped her quickly understand what was going on. She did not confront Brittany openly, instead choosing a more subtle tactic. Jessica began documenting every incident, every display of hostility. She kept detailed records, noting dates, times, and witnesses. At the same time, she intensified her work with Dr. Hartman, demonstrating professionalism and competence in contrast to Brittany's aggressiveness. The climax came in mid-March. An inmate named Carla Thompson was admitted to the infirmary with symptoms that could indicate a heart attack. The situation required an immediate decision: call an ambulance or limit treatment to the prison hospital. Brittany, based on her experience, assumed that this was another attempt at malingering. Thompson was known for such antics. Jessica insisted on a serious examination, citing the possibility of atypical symptoms of a heart attack in women. Dr. Hartman found himself in a difficult situation. On the one hand, Brittany's experience rarely let him down. On the other hand, Jessica's medical arguments were well-founded. "I think we should play it safe," he finally said. "Let's call an ambulance." The hospital examination showed that Thompson had indeed had a micro-heart attack, which could have gone unnoticed without special equipment. Jessica was right, and Brittany was wrong. "It's a good thing we didn't take any chances," Dr. Hartman told Jessica when they got the results. "Your persistence saved a woman's life." For Brittany, it was the ultimate humiliation. Not only had she lost the doctor's respect, but she had also endangered a patient's life. Guilt mixed with rage, creating an explosive emotional cocktail. That evening, Brittany decided to take a desperate step. She waited until Jessica was alone in the medical office to finish her paperwork, then went to see her. "We need to talk," she said as she entered the office. Jessica looked up from her papers. Her eyes were alert, but not fearful. "About what?" About what's going on here. About what you're doing with Dr. Hartman. I'm working, just like you. No. Brittany shook her head. You're playing a game, thinking no one understands the rules. But I do. Jessica put down her pen and looked intently at Brittany. What game? You're in love with him, or pretending to be. You're using his loneliness, his need to be needed. Jessica sighed. Brittany, I understand that you're upset about the research project. But what you're saying... What I'm saying is the truth! Brittany raised her voice. Do you think no one sees you? The way you look at him, the way you hold his hand when he hands you documents, the way you find excuses to be alone with him. That's your imagination. Then explain it to me. Brittany pulled a crumpled piece of paper from her pocket, a page from Jessica's notebook that she had torn out a few days ago. Dr. H is so different from the others here, she read aloud. Our conversations are the only thing that makes this place bearable. Sometimes it seems like he's lonely, just like me. Jessica turned pale. You stole my notebook? I found what you left in the infirmary, and I read the truth about your real motives. Those are personal notes. You had no right. I have a right to protect what belongs to me, Brittany shouted. Nothing belongs to you. Dr. Hartman is not your property. I worked with him for 2 years. I know all his habits, all his problems. I was there when he was hurting. And that gives you what? Ownership of a human being? The women stood facing each other in the small office, the air between them crackling with tension. Jessica was the first to try to diffuse the situation. Listen, she said more softly. I'm not trying to take Dr. Hartman away from you. He's a professional. He treats everyone fairly. Liar, Brittany hissed. You've been plotting this since day one. You used your weakness, your tears, to make him feel sorry for you. And then you switched to intellectual seduction. If that's what you think of me, why don't you talk to the doctor himself? Or the warden? Because they don't know you like I do. They don't see what's behind your mask of innocence. Jessica stood up from the table, and Brittany noticed that she seemed more confident than she had in the first months of her imprisonment. Prison had changed her, made her stronger. You know what, Brittany? Maybe the problem isn't me. Maybe the problem is that you're in love with Dr. Hartman and you can't even admit it to yourself. Those words hit Brittany like a bolt of lightning. No one had ever said it out loud, although everyone in the colony suspected the truth. I'm not in love. And you're afraid he'll never be able to love you back because you're an inmate and he's a doctor. Because there's a gap between you that can't be bridged. Shut up, Brittany said quietly. You're projecting your feelings onto me, accusing me of what you yourself are doing. Shut up! Brittany took a step forward, and Jessica instinctively backed away. There were only a few inches between them, and the younger woman could see the fury in Brittany's green eyes. If you don't stop your games, Brittany whispered, you'll regret it. Is that a threat? It's a warning. Jessica straightened up, summoning all her willpower. Then here's my warning. If you try to hurt me, I'll file a formal complaint, and I have witnesses to all your attempts at intimidation. What witnesses? I think Dr. Hartman has noticed the change in atmosphere in the infirmary. The warden isn't blind either, and the other inmates see what's going on. Brittany realized that Jessica was ready for war and had a plan. This wasn't the defenseless girl who had arrived at the colony 8 months ago. This was a smart, educated woman who had learned how to survive in a prison environment. We'll see, Brittany said, and left the office. Left alone, Jessica sat down at her desk and tried to continue working on the documents with trembling hands. But the letters blurred before her eyes, and Brittany's threats echoed in her ears. She realized that the conflict was out of control. What had started as a rivalry for professional recognition had turned into a personal war, where the stakes were not only her position in the medical unit, but also her safety. Through the thin wall of his office, Dr. Hartman could hear the muffled voices of the women, but he couldn't make out the words. He sensed the growing tension between his assistants, but preferred not to intervene, hoping they would resolve their differences on their own. He didn't realize that his unwillingness to take sides in the conflict only exacerbated the situation. making both women more desperate in their fight for his attention and recognition. That night, in her cell, Brittany lay awake, replaying Jessica's words in her head. Maybe the problem is that you're in love with Dr. Hartman. Those words burned more than any insult because they were true. Yes, she was in love. Hopelessly, desperately in love with a man who saw her only as an assistant and a patient. And Jessica's appearance had shattered her illusions, forcing her to admit that Dr. Hartman would never be hers. But if she couldn't have him, then no one else would. Especially not some little upstart with a college degree who thought she could just come in and take away what Brittany had spent 2 years of her life fighting for. The evening of March 23rd was quiet. In the Oakdale Women's Colony, peace had settled after lights out, and guards patrolled the corridors. Brittany lay on her bunk, unable to sleep. Jessica's words echoed in her head. Maybe the problem is that you're in love with Dr. Hartman. The phrase burned worse than acid. At 11:15 p.m., she couldn't take it anymore. Brittany knew the guard's schedule. The guard on duty was checking the perimeter, and only one person remained in the main building. The medical unit was practically deserted at night. She got out of bed silently. Her cellmate was asleep, drugged by sleeping pills. Brittany opened the lock with a sharpened spoon, a skill she had mastered over the years in prison. The corridor was empty. Dim lamps created islands of light in an ocean of shadows. Brittany moved cautiously, avoiding the surveillance cameras. She knew every blind spot. A dim light was on in the medical unit. Jessica was sitting at the table, bent over some documents, alone. Brittany's heart beat faster. Fate had pushed her to this moment. In her pocket was a homemade knife, a sharpened metal plate wrapped in electrical tape. She had made it 2 days ago, after talking to Jessica. The office door was ajar. Jessica was humming quietly as she worked with the papers. She looked calm and peaceful. Perhaps she thought she had won the war. How wrong she was. Brittany pushed the door open and entered. Jessica looked up at the creak of the floorboards. "What are you doing here? It's curfew." "I came to finish our conversation," Brittany replied. There was something in her voice that made Jessica wary. She leaned back in her chair. "What are you talking about? We already discussed everything." Not everything. Brittany stopped in front of the table. In the dim light of the lamp, her face looked haggard, her eyes burning with an unhealthy fire. "You think you're so smart? You think you can take what belongs to me?" Jessica slowly stood up, keeping her hands in plain sight. "Brittany, you're not yourself. Let's talk tomorrow." "I've never been calmer." Brittany pulled out a knife. The metal blade glinted in the lamplight. Jessica gasped and backed toward the wall. "Put that away!" "I've been here for 4 years," Brittany said quietly, taking a step forward. 4 years of fighting to stay sane, and the only thing that kept me going was working with the doctor, feeling like someone needed me. "Brittany, please." "And then you came along. With your degree, your knowledge, your ability to talk to him like an equal, and you decided to take my life away from me." Jessica pressed herself against the wall, looking for a way to retreat. But Brittany stood between her and the door. "I didn't take anyone away. Dr. Hartman is a professional." "He's in love with you," Brittany exploded. "Don't deny it. I see how he looks at you, how his face changes." "That's not true. You're making it up." "Then why did he choose you for the study? Why does he spend extra time with you? Why do his eyes light up?" Jessica realized that logic was useless. Brittany was in a state where jealousy had clouded her mind. "Let's say you're right," she said calmly, taking a step toward the door. "What will change if you kill me? He'll grieve, blame himself. It will destroy him, and then he'll never be able to love you." A flicker of doubt crossed Brittany's eyes, but then her rage flared up again. "If I can't have him, you won't either." She lunged forward with the knife. Jessica tried to dodge, but the blade entered her chest below her left shoulder. The girl screamed and fell to her knees. "Help!" she cried. But Brittany didn't stop. The rage that had been building up for months burst out. Another blow, then another. Jessica tried to defend herself with her hands, but her strength was leaving her. "Why?" she whispered as she fell to the floor. "Because he's mine," Brittany replied. "He's always been mine." Jessica stared wide-eyed for a few more seconds. Then her gaze went blank. Blood spread across the linoleum. Brittany sank to her knees. The rage evaporated, leaving emptiness and horror. "Oh my God, she whispered. What have I done? But it was too late. Jessica Reynolds was dead. Her instinct for self-preservation took over. Brittany wiped the knife on the curtain, hid it in her pocket, and slipped out of the infirmary. The walk back to her cell seemed endless. She hid the knife under her mattress and lay down, pulling the blanket over her head. Her heart was beating so loudly that it could wake her roommate, but Dorothy was snoring peacefully. The morning began as usual. Wake up at 6 a.m., breakfast, roll call. Brittany moved like a robot, trying to look normal. At 7:30, she met Nurse Patricia Morris at the infirmary, who looked agitated. Brittany, thank God. We have a situation. Jessica isn't answering, and the door is locked from the inside. Maybe she's sick? Brittany asked. I don't know. The doctor is on his way. Dr. Hartman arrived, looking concerned. The nurse unlocked the door with a spare key. The doctor went in first. A moment later, a muffled scream rang out. Oh my God! Call security! The nurse and Brittany rushed to the door. Jessica was lying in a pool of blood, her eyes wide open, her face pale. The nurse screamed. Brittany feigned shock. What happened? The doctor knelt down to check her pulse. She's dead. Someone killed her. The medical ward turned into a crime scene. Security guards, prison warden Rebecca Stone, and a medical examiner arrived. The office was cordoned off. We haven't had a murder in 14 years, Stone told the security captain. A knife was used, the medical examiner stated. Multiple wounds. The attacker was enraged. By noon, Detective Thomas Garcia, a specialist in crimes in correctional facilities, arrived. After examining the crime scene, he requested a list of people who had access to the infirmary. Dr. Hartman, Nurse Morris, and 2 assistants, Brittany Collins and the victim herself, the chief reported. The doctor was questioned first. He was in shock. His hands were shaking. Jessica was a capable girl. We were working on a research project, he said. There was some friction with Brittany, but I thought they had settled their differences. The nurse was more candid. There was a war between them. Brittany considered the medical unit her territory. She didn't like Jessica showing up with her degree. I heard them arguing a few days ago. Finally, Brittany was questioned. The detective watched her closely. Where were you between 11 p.m. and 6 a.m.? In my cell, sleeping. Who can confirm that? My neighbor Dorothy Clark, but she takes sleeping pills. What was your relationship with the victim? We work together. We're not friends, but we're not enemies either. Were there any conflicts? Minor disagreements, nothing serious. The detective realized he had a suspect, a motive, and an opportunity. He needed proof. The search for the murder weapon began. The medical unit was combed thoroughly, but no knife was found. The suspect's cells were searched. In Brittany's cell, a homemade knife with blood on the blade was found under the mattress. It's not mine. Someone planted it, Brittany claimed. In your cell? Under the mattress? I don't know how it got there, but the fingerprints on the handle belonged to Brittany Collins. Detective Garcia knew the case was solved. Formal procedures were pending, but the killer had been found. Jealousy and obsession in the confined space of a prison had led to a tragedy that could have been prevented. On the morning of March 24th, Detective Garcia sat in the warden's office studying the case file. The evidence against Brittany Collins seemed irrefutable. The murder weapon with her fingerprints, the motive, the opportunity. But an experienced investigator knew that there were always hidden pitfalls in prison cases. I want to re-interview Collins, he told Rebecca Stone. This time, in more detail. The warden nodded. Of course, but keep in mind, she's requested a lawyer. Brittany was brought into the interrogation room accompanied by her appointed defense attorney, a young lawyer named David Campbell. She looked tired but held herself with dignity. Miss Collins, the detective began. Yesterday you claimed that the knife was planted. Who could have done that? The lawyer put his hand on his client's shoulder. My client is ready to answer questions, but first she would like to make a statement. Garcia raised an eyebrow. I'm listening. Brittany took a deep breath and looked straight into the detective's eyes. I killed Jessica Reynolds. The lawyer turned sharply to her. Brittany, we discussed this. No, she said firmly. Enough lies. I'm tired of pretending. The detective turned on the tape recorder. Do you understand your rights? Anything you say can be used against you. I understand, and I want to tell the truth, the whole truth. For the next hour, Brittany methodically recounted the events. How her affection for Dr. Hartman grew, how Jessica's appearance destroyed her world, how jealousy turned to hatred. I knew he would never be mine, she said in a monotone voice. But seeing him fall for someone else was more than I could bear. What happened that night? I didn't plan to kill her. I made the knife, but I only meant to scare her. To make her leave the infirmary, to end her relationship with the doctor. Brittany fell silent, gathering her thoughts. But when I saw her there, so calm, so confident, something broke inside me. Describe how it happened. Brittany recounted breaking into the infirmary, talking to Jessica, and how her rage took over. Her voice remained steady, as if she were reading from a script. How many times did you hit her? I don't remember exactly. The first time I aimed for her shoulder, I just wanted to hurt her. But she screamed, tried to run away, and I lost control. The detective made a note. How did you feel afterwards? Empty. Horror at what I had done, but also relief. It was finally over. The lawyer tried to intervene. Detective, my client is clearly in a state of stress. I'm fine, Brittany interrupted him. I'm fine for the first time in months. After the interview, the detective went to the infirmary to talk to Dr. Hartman. The doctor was sitting in his office, staring out the window. He looked several years older overnight. Doctor, I need to ask you a few questions. Hartman turned around. His eyes were red from lack of sleep. Did she confess? Yes, but I want to understand the whole picture. Did you really not notice the depth of the conflict between your assistants? The doctor lowered his head. I noticed the tension, but I thought it was just normal workplace friction. I was blind. Brittany Collins claims she was in love with you. Did you know that? Hartman winced painfully. I suspected it. But she never crossed the line. She was professional, competent. I decided to ignore it, hoping her feelings would pass. And Jessica? What was your relationship with her? Purely professional. Yes, I appreciated her education and intelligence, but there was never anything inappropriate. But you spent extra time together. Because of the research. It was work, nothing more. The detective studied the doctor's face. Do you understand that your behavior could have been misinterpreted? I understand now, Hartman replied quietly. If I had been more attentive, more careful, Jessica would be alive. Detective Garcia spent the next week talking to other inmates, guards, and medical staff. A clear picture emerged. The conflict had been brewing for months. Everyone had seen it, but no one had seen fit to intervene. There's always tension in prison, explained guard Susan Wright. Women fight over work, food, phone calls. We can't get involved in every argument. But this wasn't a normal argument, the detective objected. It's obvious now. At the time, it just seemed like a woman's drama. Nurse Patricia Morris was more critical. The administration knew about the problem, but chose to turn a blind eye. Dr. Hartman took the patient's problems too much to heart. It wasn't the first time it had caused tension. Have there been similar cases? Not murders, of course, but jealousy, rivalry for his attention, constantly. He's a good doctor, but naive when it comes to human psychology. The detective found records of several incidents over the past few years in the medical records, fights between patients, accusations of receiving undeserved privileges, complaints of favoritism. Everything was chalked up to women's nature and the prison atmosphere. 10 days later, the investigation was complete. Detective Garcia submitted his final report, which not only described the crime, but also analyzed the systemic problems that led to the tragedy. The murder was the result of a toxic combination of factors, he wrote. The emotional immaturity of the accused, inadequate supervision by the administration, and the professional blindness of the medical staff to the psychological dynamics of the relationship. The detective last met with Brittany before the case was sent to court. She was sitting in a holding cell reading a book. Any questions about the procedure? He asked. My lawyer explained everything. Life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Do you regret what you did? Brittany was silent for a long time. I'm sorry Jessica died. She didn't deserve it. But do I regret stopping her? She shook her head. I don't know. What are you going to do now? Read. Think. Try to understand how I got to this point. She looked at the detective. I'm not crazy, you know. I just love too much, or I thought I did. The detective nodded. There are psychologists in prison. Maybe they can help you figure things out. Maybe, but I can't turn back time. A month later, the court found Brittany Collins guilty of first-degree murder. She was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. During the trial, she remained calm, making no attempt to justify herself or elicit sympathy. Dr. Clyde Hartman resigned the day after the verdict was handed down. In his statement, he wrote, "I cannot continue my work knowing that my professional blindness cost a young woman her life." Prison warden. Rebecca Stone introduced new protocols for medical staff, including mandatory professional ethics seminars, rotating assistants every 6 months, and regular meetings with a psychologist to discuss the emotional dynamics of staff-inmate relationships. "We cannot allow this to happen again," she said at an administration meeting. "Every life in our system is important, and we have a duty to protect everyone, inmates and staff alike." Detective Garcia included the Collins-Reynolds case in his lectures to correctional officers. He talked about the dangers of ignoring emotional conflicts, the importance of professional boundaries, and how isolation and the confines of the prison environment can exacerbate human passions to the extreme. "Prison is a pressure cooker," he said. "The slightest spark can cause an explosion. Our job is to prevent the pressure from building up." The story of the Oakdale Women's Prison Infirmary became a warning about how jealousy and obsession can turn ordinary people into murderers, how the confined space of a prison exacerbates emotions to dangerous levels, and how important it is to recognize the signs of impending tragedy in time. Jessica Reynolds was buried in her hometown cemetery. Her parents, several friends from college, and former colleagues attended the funeral. Dr. Hartman also came to say goodbye, standing apart from the main group of mourners. He knew he would never forgive himself for failing to protect her. The truth was simple and terrifying at the same time. Love turned into obsession can destroy everything in its path. And no one is safe from this destructive force. Not doctors, not prisoners, not even those who just happen to be in the wrong place at the wrong time.